Few of the many stories about Batman and his clashes with the Joker have risen to such legendary acclaim as Grant Morrison's 1989 novel, Batman: Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious Earth. In this epic novel, Batman enters an Arkham where his rogues gallery is on the loose and running the show. As he ventures deeper, he learns about Arkham's founder, Amadeus Arkham, how the place came into existence, and the supernatural and psychological mystery that haunts the infamous mansion. Without further ado, let's explore Batman: Arkham Asylum, where the Caped Crusader must confront the horrors of the human mind, as well as his demons within. Ghosts from the past. The story begins with a flashback, and we get to follow the narrative through the words of Amadeus Arkham. If it isn't obvious yet, this Amadeus was the one who founded Arkham Asylum in the first place. There's much to his tragic backstory and past life, which is also something that's been covered in this amazingly brilliant comic. His journal provides commentary as we follow Dave McKean's eerie artwork of Arkham's mind. He's walking up the stairs in the Arkham family mansion. The imposing walls and empty hallways that seep shadows from every corner feel like a visual portrayal of Arkham's own troubled mind. His father has passed away, and his mother seems to be of ailing health. As he carries a meal to his mother, Amadeus Arkham reflects on how the enormous house has seemingly grown into his entire world after his father's passing. The world outside had no trace of existence left in his mind, as the vast emptiness of the manor seemed larger than life. So much so that his own perception of reality seems to linger on the edge of fantasy. He feels nebulous about his presence in the house, liking it to that of a ghost wandering the corridors. Until one night in the year 1901, this very night in question, he seems to have caught a glimpse of something otherworldly. But was this sight truly something supernatural, or was it simply a figment of his own troubled mind? Arkham arrives at his mother's bedside, asking her to eat what he's brought to her. The old woman, however, says that she's already eaten. As soon as she says this, we see beetles crawl out of her mouth, implying that she had, in fact, ingested the bugs. Arkham recounts that this was the night when he felt truly alone. Years later, he would learn the symbolic significance of the beetle, which was supposed to represent rebirth. Arkham further writes that he was convinced that his mother was just trying to protect herself from something in the only way she knew. According to him, she was reborn into this other world that he spoke of, a world of fathomless symbols and portents, of magic and terror. The call to Arkham. As the narration of Arkham's journal cuts off with the mention of mysterious symbols, we're sent to present-day Gotham. The symbol of the Dark Knight lights up the city's skies. Two shadowy figures, Commissioner Jim Gordon and Batman, met up to discuss a certain situation. It seems as if Batman was summoned for an emergency, and of course, the bat signal comes up mostly when Gordon needs the bat-themed superhero for something that can't be fixed by usual channels and means. When asked about what it was, Gordon answers somberly by saying that a riot has broken out at Arkham Asylum. As if, inexplicably, the inmates have taken control of the facility and have several people from the staff hostage. With this leverage, they've been making demands of the Gotham police, having asked for furniture, stored dummies, food, and clothing. Their final demand, however, is something that they only want to talk to Batman about. Gordon shows Batman the telephone, saying that it's the Joker on the other end who he would be speaking to. Batman gets to the point with his greatest adversary, the man, the legend, the Joker himself. Batman asks the Clown Prince of Crime what he wants. The Joker greets Batman in his usual cheery and twisted manner of speaking, to which Batman quickly demands that he get to the point. Well, the point is that the inmates want Batman in Arkham, and that he belongs there in the madhouse alongside the other inmates. Batman asks what happens if he refuses to come, and the Joker replies by sending a chilling message. As a warning, he playfully adds that they have so many friends over there at the asylum, as we get to hear the presence of another person on the other end. There seems to be a scratching sound in the background as the Joker introduces this other character, a 19-year-old girl named Pearl. Commissioner Gordon is puzzled by the noise, as Joker goes on to explain that the girl in question was someone who used to work at the asylum kitchens, and that she'd just drawn him a beautiful house with a pencil he'd just sharpened. The haunting realization just dawns on everyone listening that the scratching noise had just been that of the sharpening of a pencil, and that the Joker was about to use it for something really unpleasant. As the Joker starts to rumble about Pearl's beautiful blue eyes, we get to hear her let out a horrifying scream. Assuming that the poor girl had her eyes gouged out with the object, even the super brooding and ice-cold Batman couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the cruelty. This was something he couldn't just ignore, as the Joker had made perfectly clear that he wasn't up for a negotiation. Before the conversation ends, however, the Joker lets Batman know that he has half an hour to arrive and that he should bring a white stick. Batman brings Gordon aside to have a few words before he departs. Gordon lets the Dark Knight know that he doesn't have to go in there, as they could arrange a SWAT team for the operation. Batman, however, wants to go there alone, as he feels that this is something he needs to attend to personally. He is afraid, however. Gordon misinterprets his fears, saying that Arkham's dangerous reputation had understandably shaken up even the Batman. Correcting him, the Caped Crusader says that the Batman isn't afraid of anything. It was rather the person underneath who was afraid that the Joker might have been right. He was afraid that as he walked in through the gates of the asylum, it would be no different than coming home, as he could hardly stop himself from questioning the rationality of his own actions. If you've had fun watching the video until now, please leave a like and hit that subscribe button. It may be a small click from you, but it goes a long way for us to bring you more videos. And now, let's continue. Coming home. The story takes a step back to the year 1920 as we go through Amadeus Arkham's journal again. He had returned to his family home in Gotham after his mother's passing. She had taken her own life by cutting open her throat with a razor. Strangely enough, Arkham seemed to think that it was for the best. Being the only heir, he'd inherited the manor and the acres of land upon which the house was built. He was clearly shaken up by the loss of his mother, as he sought to build a sanctuary for the mentally unwell. He wanted to serve those in need of proper treatment and care so that they didn't end up suffering the same fate as his mother. Arkham spends the first time in many years in his old room at the manor. He didn't seem to sleep well, disturbed by haunting dreams wherein the sounds of beating wings were keeping him up. A dog barking in the distance didn't help his situation. We find out that he's been living with his family in the city of Metropolis, where he was a specialist at the state psychiatric hospital. It so happened that a particular inmate from the Metropolis Penitentiary, Martin Hawkins, nicknamed Mad Dog, had been referred to him. This Mad Dog Hawkins was someone who used to maul the faces and sexual organs of his victims. He was a troubled individual, and his past was riddled with physical and sexual abuse by his father. When asked as to why he committed the atrocities, he simply says that it was the Virgin Mary's idea to punish the promiscuous who spread diseases. He was also asked why he cut himself with a razor, to which he let Arkham know that he only did so in order to feel something. Arkham reflects that after 2 hours, Hawkins was taken back into the penitentiary to await his trial, which he thought was unfair. He continues to say that people like Hawkins had committed no crime. Rather, they were simply ailing from psychological issues. The system was unjust to them, as well as to many others like him. Arkham realized that he had found his calling in trying to help these people. He informs his wife Constance and their daughter Harriet that they'd be returning shortly to the Arkham Manor in Gotham City, which he wanted to turn into a treatment facility for the mentally ill. As he spent the night in his own room, he dreams that he's a child again. He finds his childhood self lost inside a house of mirrors at a funhouse. He dreams of seeing the figures of strangers in the mirrors, and it scares him too much to go any closer. As he stands in front of a door marked as Tunnel of Love, he's hesitant to proceed further. His father then finds him, and they leave through the way they entered, as the child is too scared to go through the said tunnel. As Arkham dreamed, he saw the figures from the mirrors creep out into the real world in order to come looking for him. This jolts him awake, and he feels like an adult once more. But that feeling lasts for only a brief moment, as even in his wakefulness, he can't help but feel he's back in the very place he belongs, that is, in the old house. At this point, I find it interesting to note that it's a splendid and unusual artistic choice to give every character their own font when it came to their speech bubbles. From the Joker's unhinged streaks of red, looking like spatters of blood, to Batman's own black and white, reflecting the strict code of conduct to which he adhered at all times. Batman arrives at the asylum. We see the present storyline unfold once again, and Batman has reached the gates of the old Arkham house. His arrival is met by the Joker himself, who has salt in his fingers. He suggests that the salt be sprinkled upon him, as he thinks he's just good enough to eat. The Batman says that he's here, and it was about time they released the hostages. The Joker calls out to his lackeys, telling them to hit the trail. We find that the girl named Pearl is with the Joker, and that she has her eyes intact, something which Batman did not expect. As he expresses his confusion regarding this to the Joker, the latter screams out, "April Fools!" in his characteristic hysterical fashion, implying that the act of gouging Pearl's eyes out was just another sick prank of his. After he's done laughing at his own joke, the Joker asks Batman to cheer up as well and follows up with another question. As he's about to ask Batman something regarding brittle-boned babies, the latter shuts him up mid-sentence. The Joker sarcastically asks Batman to loosen up once again, trying to reach out to him with one hand. Batman erupts in fury, ordering him to take his filthy hands off him. The Joker, quite unfazed, asks if he's touched a nerve. Taking a jab at Batman again, he asks how the boy wonder, that is, Robin, was doing and if he had started shaving yet. Batman calls the Joker a degenerate in response, and the Joker simply says in return that flattery would get him nowhere, as he was now in the real world where the lunatics had taken over the asylum. Turning to the large hall inside, the Joker proclaims, "Let the Feast of Fools begin." All of a sudden, A man protests, having had enough of Joker's madness. It was clear that he was one of the hostages whose face was painted with a clown's makeup, something which presumably the Joker had done. The Joker snaps back, saying that there was no such thing as enough madness, as madness could never be measured, adding that the man looks pretty whenever he himself is upset. He continues his depraved torment of the hostage, pulling him close to his suit, almost stifling his face, even asking the man to kiss him. The man protests, trying to warn Joker, but to little avail. The Joker says that he's in no position to issue warnings, given his guilty secret, so he should just sit down and stay down until he comes up with something funny to do to him. The Batman interrupts, asking who these people were and why they were still being kept around, given that the deal was to release all the hostages. This is when another woman speaks up, saying that they were part of a few who voluntarily stayed back. She introduces herself, saying that her name is Ruth Adams and that she's a psychotherapist at the facility. The Joker follows up and introduces the man who spoke up at first. He is Dr. Cavendish, the administrator of the asylum, who apparently loves to administer current to ECT patients. The man explains that he considers it his duty to the state to stay back and that he would not just leave the asylum in the hands of the madman who had taken over. Right then, the Joker exclaims at a stench that just caught his nose. It's revealed that it was Harvey Dent, also known as Two-Face, who was responsible for this since he had relieved himself on the floor, unable to make the decision whether or not to go to the bathroom. We find him crouching on the floor with a pack of cards. Batman is surprised to find him there, and having seen him in this pathetic condition, he turns to Ruth Adams to ask what she'd done to him. The doctor replies disdainfully, saying that she's done nothing to the man other than give him a path toward treatment. You see, Harvey Dent used to make all his decisions based on the flip of his coin, which was marked on one side and regular on the other. The doctor explains that this represented the two halves of his split personality. Her mode of therapy had been to give him more choices, so she had the coin replaced by a die instead, effectively giving him 6 choices instead of 3. When Harvey seemed to adjust to this, however, she replaced the die with a pack of cards, giving him even more choices. Ruth seems to further consider switching up the number of choices by using an I Ching, so that with the increase in alternative possibilities, Harvey's reliance on chance to make decisions eventually comes to an end. Batman, however, sees through the ineffective nature of this method, as he points out that this has completely shattered the man's decision-making faculties, so much so that he can no longer decide whether or not to go to the bathroom without consulting the cards. Ruth Adams says that in psychiatry, sometimes one needs to pull things down in order to rebuild. In this case, Harvey Dent's mental health. Batman adds that it's hard to imagine how being in such a place would be conducive to anyone's mental health, let alone Harvey's. Ruth scoffs at the suggestion, saying that what Batman is alluding to is nothing more than macabre folklore regarding the Arkham Manor. The local legends about the place seem to revolve around hidden passages, the ghost of Amadeus Arkham, and doors that supposedly bleed. Not convinced, Batman remarks that her techniques seem to have had no effect on the Joker. Adams admitted that the Joker was a special case, so much so that many specialists consider him beyond treatment. Personally, she thinks that it may not be even proper to consider him insane, and that the condition could very well have its roots in a neurological disorder similar to that of Tourette's syndrome. The Joker's anomalous mind could also reflect a kind of hypersanity. Ruth's explanation continues along the lines of the Joker's behavior as a sort of modification to the nature of human perceptions, something that's oddly more suited to urban life at the end of the 20th century. The Batman interjects, saying that it's no explanation for his atrocities against his victims. The Doctor explains that, unlike most people, the Joker seems to have no control over the sensory inputs that he receives from the outside world, and that his sporadic antics are merely the coping mechanism for the inflow of information. According to her, this explains why the villain has strikingly different personalities every other day. On some days, he's a mischievous clown, while on others, he's nothing short of a psychopathic killer. This leads her to think that the Joker has no real personality in the first place. Rather, he invents himself day in and day out, assuming the persona of the Lord of Chaos while the world around him is merely a theater of absurdities. Startling the Doctor, Joker interrupts, proposing card games to everyone. He says that he adores card games and holds a piece of card painted with streaks and smudges of blue and white before everyone. He says that he interprets the image as 2 angels in the background, constellations of black holes. He also sees biological processes beyond the conception of human beings, as well as an act of a Jewish ventriloquist locked in the trunk of a red Chevrolet. Holding the card out to Batman, the Joker asks for his interpretation of the image. The Batman simply says that he sees nothing. The Joker teases him, saying he doesn't even see the visage of a cute long-legged boy in swimming trunks. I can only seem to connect this strange allusion to Joker's earlier comment about the boy wonder, Robin. 2 other inmates appear behind the Joker, insisting that the clown is wasting his time. They want Batman to take off his mask so that they get to see his real face. The Joker knows better, however, and snaps at the 2, saying that the masked Batman is his real face. Rather than take that off, the Joker wants to peer into the true depths of the Batman's personality. He wants to know what it feels like to have someone prying through his mind, and so he proposes a word association test to Ruth Adams for Batman to undergo. Ruth objects to it, knowing that it can bring out the traumas of a man to the surface. However, Batman asks her to go ahead, since it's just words to him. The Joker is happy that Batman is being game, commending him on his undaunted nature. The scene shifts back to Amadeus Arkham's time. Nightmares of the Arkham House. Arkham notes in his journal how the Archangel Michael fought with the dragon Lucifer, the fallen angel. The dragon was cast out from the heavens and became the serpent known as the Devil. In this form, as we know from the biblical accounts, Satan deceives the world and its people. Arkham compares himself to the Archangel, deciding to fight against the demons by bending the Arkham house to his own will. He wants to transform the dismal corridors of his childhood, open up the locked doors and fill the empty rooms. Above all, he wishes to establish the image of the triumph of reason over the irrational. Symbolically, we get to see the statue of Archangel Michael with his spear smiting the dragon. His daughter Harriet, however, has been having nightmares. Arkham insists that it was because of reading Lewis Carroll's work, but his daughter would still continue to read and reread the books. He hopes that these nightmares will come to an end once the reconstruction of the house is finished. We see his daughter's bedside littered with disturbing sketches that she made, and as Arkham sits beside her, he finds a playing card marked with the Joker. Picking it up, he thinks that one of the workmen must have dropped it there by accident. In the present day, Ruth Adams begins the word association test on the Batman. When asked what image he associates with the word mother, Batman envisions his own mother's broken string of pearls from her necklace, so he replies with pearl. With the word handle, he associates a revolver, and with the word gun, he associates his father. Proceeding with the train of thoughts, Ruth asks what he associates with the word father, to which Batman replies with death. She follows up, asking the same about end, at which point the Batman gnashes his teeth, asking her to stop, as the memories were clearly taking a toll on him. The Joker is delighted and lets out a burst of manic laughter. The journal continues, with Arkham recounting being invited to Europe in 1920. He met with the great psychologist Carl Jung in Switzerland, and in England he met Aleister Crowley, nicknamed the wickedest man on earth. Surprisingly, he finds the man to be quite charming and well-educated. He recalls Crowley beating him at chess twice. Arkham runs out of French cigarettes in the mid-Atlantic on his voyage back. Arkham arrives home in time for Christmas, finding the construction work well underway. He's pleasantly surprised by his wife, Constance, who's added a Japanese clownfish to his aquarium. Arkham thinks that the clownfish are a fascinating species. When a dominant female dies, one of the males in her entourage changes his sex in order to take up the mantle of the deceased queen of the pack. For some inexplicable reason, Arkham is reminded of the French term of an April Fool's joke, namely Poisson d'avril, which, when translated literally, means the April fish. You see, this seems to be one of the many recurring themes of the story, as the plot across various timelines revolves around events that unfold on this very date, that is, the 1st of April. From the very first moment of Batman's arrival at the gates of the Arkham Asylum, when the Joker had his very own April Fool's prank, to the sinister retellings of Amadeus Arkham's past experiences, this date has this overarching significance within the story. As Arkham goes on to experience a déjà vu, he's brought back by the ring of a telephone call. The authorities at the penitentiary inform him that the perpetrator from earlier, Martin Hawkins, had escaped and that the police want Arkham's opinions concerning his state of mind. Arkham tells them that he's highly dangerous and that he would like to leave it to the authorities to capture Hawkins, as it isn't his problem, at least not that night. Constance appears behind Arkham, who's hanging up the receiver, asking if something was the problem. Arkham denies that there's any trouble whatsoever. He's brought a cuckoo clock for his daughter Harriet from Switzerland, and he notes that she adores it. He hopes that the present might help her with her nightmares, which seem to have continued. He reminds himself that bad dreams are not an uncommon occurrence in children, and that he considers his child to be a very beautiful and intelligent girl. He almost wishes that she never grows up. One cannot help but wonder if this is foreshadowing for something that was to come. As we shall see, this decision to leave Hawkins at large would come back to haunt Amadeus Arkham in the worst possible ways. Hide and seek. The Joker remarks that it's been getting rather late. It was time to begin with the entertainment that he'd planned for tonight, if Batman was feeling up to the task, that is. When the latter asks about what the task was supposed to be, the Joker explains what he calls his game of hide and seek. The Batman is given 1 hour to find his way out of the Arkham Asylum premises, and when the time is up, the inmates are going to come his way to hunt him down. The lineup of villains included names like the Scarecrow, who's infamous for his use of fear-inducing toxins, and Clayface, whose skin had a rare condition, making him a dangerous foe as his skin could infect others upon contact. There's also the infamous DC antagonist, Dr. Destiny, who had the ability to manipulate people based on their dreams, in order to make them commit heinous crimes just by making eye contact with his adversaries. The Joker also reminds that among the others waiting for him was Killer Croc, who was being let loose from his damp and dark cellars wherein he was chained up. Batman reminds the Joker that he doesn't take orders from the villain and that he could simply refuse, so the Joker decides to tell him a joke to explain the situation to him. Pulling a gun at a security worker's head, he goes on with his joke. He says that there was once a man who had just gone up to the hospital as his wife had delivered their baby. The man wanted to see his wife and newborn child and so asked the doctor how both of them were doing. The doctor assured him that they were both fine and that his wife was healthy, having given birth to a healthy baby boy. Overjoyed, the man rushed to the maternity ward with flowers, only to find his wife's bed empty. He turned to the doctor, who was hysterical now, as along with his nurses, he screamed, "April's Fools!" to the man's face. The doctor then revealed that his wife was dead and that the newborn was born spastic. Ending his sick punchline, he shoots the security officer and turns to Batman, saying it was such a waste of human life. The Joker points his gun to another woman's head, telling Batman to run, for his game would end at the stroke of midnight. He had just made it clear that Batman was in no position to negotiate. As Batman raced up the hallways, his mind raced back to the fateful night of his parents' murder. We follow his recollection by watching as the scared little Bruce Wayne was being reprimanded by his father for being afraid of the movie scene that they were watching at the theater. His father was warning him that if he didn't stop crying and start acting like a grown man, he'd be leaving him right there. The memories continue to haunt Batman as he smashes a mirror in the Arkham Manor and proceeds to stab his own hand, thinking about the horrifying shooting of his parents that took place in the moments after. It was true that Bruce was left by his parents that night, right there, forever. Meanwhile, someone beside the Joker suggests that they go after the Batman right then and there, to which Joker objects. He was going to stick to the deal of giving him an hour. When the man turns to ask Harvey Dent as to what he thought about the situation, Harvey simply stares off at the moon, admiring how beautiful it was. He adds that the moon is simply a huge silver dollar coin flipped by God and that it turned the scarred side up so that the world came to be made. The man scoffs at this ridiculous interpretation, saying that he can't even get a decent conversation in this place and that they're all insane. The Mad Hatter beckons to the Joker, expressing how bored they were all feeling, to which the Joker suggests that they simply pretend like the hour is already up. Back in the spring of 1920, it was the night of April 1st in the Arkham house. Amadeus Arkham continues his journal, writing about how the springtime weather could be deceitful, being frightfully cold for that time of the year. He's seen walking up the stairway, calling out to his wife, saying that the front door was wide open. Walking into the upstairs room, what he sees fills his mind up with terror. He sees his wife first, her body having been cut up in several pieces. His eyes meet the body of his daughter soon after, as he finds the little girl violated brutally. In quite the shock, he wonders even where her head is. As he looks away, his eyes come across the girl's dollhouse, as the daughter's eyes peer back at him from in there, her head severed and placed inside. This utterly gut-wrenching sight displaces his sanity as he slowly and methodically puts on his mother's wedding dress. Wearing the dress, he kneels down at the nursery abattoir, and all of his actions seem perfectly rational to him. Soon enough, he finds himself curled up before the lavatory bowl, choking, sobbing, and throwing up. He wonders if all his hopes, dreams, and aspirations had amounted to utter despair. He feels afraid, and he thinks he might fall ill. The encounters begin. In the present time, the hide-and-seek has begun. In one of the dark corners of the house, we see Clayface slowly crawling. He utters the word sick over and over again until he comes across Batman. He tells Batman that his skin is sick, that it's rotten and seeping. Reaching out to the Dark Knight, Clayface explains that it's only he who can help him, as he only wants to share his disease. Batman warns him not to touch his body, to which he pays no heed and continues reaching out. Swiftly, Batman lets loose a kick to the man's knee, snapping it against the wall. Clayface screams out in pain, but Batman has more encounters coming his way. Dr. Destiny approaches in his wheelchair, calling out to Clayface. Looking for the latter, the withered doctor searches here and there, ultimately getting frustrated at the lack of a response. He snaps, calling Clayface a dirty bastard, and saying he does not need him to answer, that he doesn't need him at all. It turns out that he's just calling out to someone as he needs his wheelchair to be pushed. All of a sudden, Batman appears from the shadows behind the wheelchair, careful not to make eye contact with the doctor, and kicks him down the stairways, effectively putting him out of commission. This meeting is immediately followed by another, as the sound of a metal rake scraping on the floor catches the Batman's attention. It turns out that it's the Scarecrow, whom the Batman swiftly avoids and passes by into another room. As Batman walks in, he gets to meet the Mad Hatter this time, who's sitting by, smoking out of a large hookah. Seeing Batman, he expresses how glad he is for the former to make it to the asylum. He says that he has quite a few things to tell him, and that he expects Batman to be quite mentally fragile at this point, since Arkham Asylum tends to bring out the most vulnerable parts of sanity within everyone. He explains further that the apparent disorder of the universe seems to be just a higher order of things. It seems to be an implicated order beyond the comprehension of human beings, which is why he's so interested in the children. He thinks that the children are all mad, but within each of them lies an implicate adult, something which resembles to him the emergence of order out of chaos. Or just the other way around. His depraved ramblings continue, explaining that to know the little children was to know himself better, especially when it came to little girls, specifically little blonde girls whom he seems to consider shameless. The Mad Hatter adds that sometimes he thinks that the asylum is simply a head, one giant head that assimilates every single one of the inmates into existence by dreaming of them. Perhaps it's just the Batman's head, he adds. He suggests that Arkham is nothing but a looking glass, and that all of them are nothing more than Batman's own reflection. The case of Martin Hawkins. We're taken back in time through the pages of Arkham's journal. He explains that despite the tragedy that had unfolded, the opening of the institution went ahead as scheduled. It was named the Elizabeth Arkham Asylum for the Criminally Insane, and it had its doors open officially in November of 1921. One of the first patients there happened to be Martin Hawkins himself, the one who we came to learn about before. We're now revealed that it was he who was behind the gruesome deaths of Harriet and Constance, Arkham's own daughter and wife, respectively. Martin Mad Dog Hawkins seems to be delighted to recount every single shred of pain that he inflicted upon them in vivid detail. Arkham, as the therapist, listens to his account as Hawkins recounts his daughter begging him to be violated. Arkham proceeds with the treatment for 6 months, and is praised for his courage and compassion. However, on April 1st of 1922, on the very same day that his family was taken from him, Arkham decides to strap Hawkins into the electroshock couch and burn him to his death. The killing is played off as an accident, as machines such as those tend to be dangerous for that treatment. The electricity surging through the air had left the surroundings with the stench of ozone and burned skin. The smell permeates into Arkham's nostrils, but the man feels nothing. Amadeus Arkham takes to patrolling the corridors in the dead of night, visiting the secret room often in order to keep his journal up to date. He thinks that routine is an important component of his life to keep his mind from straying off into morbid thoughts and imaginings. Sometimes, however, he's sure that he can hear fits of cruel, hysterical laughter from a cell which he knows is empty. But once he tapes over the mirror at his study, the laughter ceases. We delve more into Arkham's own disturbed psychological state as he slowly descends into his own insanity. He seems to think that the house is a biological organism of its own, something which is hungry for madness. Arkham considers his own movements to be a regular part of the biological process, as synchronized as the movements of a ballet. He considers the empty corridors to be the maze of his dreams, the maze where he is lost. The Arkham Maze. In the present course of events, Batman stumbles on yet another inmate. This time, it's someone who's strapped to electrical wires meant for therapeutic uses. Just outside of the room, however, is a sign written in Greek that reads, "Discover thyself." It's one of the many symbolic imageries present on the pages that convey some recurring themes. In this case, it could very well be a reflection of Batman's own rediscovery of his memories and traumas. It could also be another forerunning concept that surrounds Amadeus Arkham's character. This time, the inmate Batman runs into happens to be a character named Maxi Zeus. Upon Batman's arrival, he greets him as a pilgrim, someone who would come to be in his presence. The man considers himself to be a god, asking Batman to gaze upon him. He calls himself Zeus Aranothelus, someone who's part man and part woman. He says that electricity engulfs their own brain, and it's just the fire of heaven. A worker in the shadows asks to administer more current into this patient, who explains that they've stored the power of all the voltages in their head. This patient, Maxi Zeus, continues the rant by saying how they want electricity to escape their body like the gift of the divine. They seek to be worshipped by men and women for bestowing fertility upon the arid lands of Africa with the power that surged through them. They call themselves Zeus, the Lord of ECT, the god of electric retribution. They turn to Batman, saying that he too can be bestowed with power and that they can give him power so that he, in turn, can pass it on. The patient offers his body and blood to Batman to eat and drink, adding that the altar of AC/DC awaits and that they can get to know him in a shower of electrical sparks. Batman turns to leave as the patient begs him to wait, but he has to find his way out in time. Amadeus Arkham's journal reads out again. This time, we're made aware that more and more of his friends have grown concerned about his ill health and have decided to take him out to attend the opera. He seems to think that his friends don't understand and that they don't see him break into 1,000 pieces. Time appears to work strangely to him. We learn that he's taken 3 portions of the psychedelic Amanita mushrooms. When the effects start to appear in 40 minutes or so, he's convinced that the house is alive and is trying to communicate with him. He feels a pressure at the back of his head, which makes him turn around. He sees his aquarium and finds 2 clownfishes gliding toward one another. Their shape forms the sign of Pisces, the zodiac constellation. He knows that it's the symbolic representation of trial and initiation, of death and rebirth. This comes as a revelation to him, as he thinks that this is a path being shown to him. Following where it leads, he's convinced that, like the mythical figure of Parsifal, he must confront the demons of irrationality that plague him. He concludes that he must go into the dark tower of the house so that he can face the symbolic dragon within its confines. He only seems to have one fear, namely that of his own inability, or rather the possibility that he might be too weak to defeat it. Even as the narration follows the journal, the visuals are those of Batman coming face-to-face with Killer Croc and engaging in vicious combat. The reptilian creature's claws tear through Batman's skin as the two proceed to clash. Arkham writes about feeling small and afraid under the influence of drugs. He fears he might have taken the wrong step by intoxicating himself with hallucinations as he hears the dragon he's been referring to haul its weight across the corridors of the asylum. He feels borne up on a wave of sheer terror. Batman himself is tossed out of a window, shattering glass and sending the shards flying around him. Arkham continues as he feels like there's nothing to hold on to, as the panel depicts Batman arresting his fall by grabbing onto a ledge. Arkham is stricken by panic, and he keeps fleeing within the confines of the asylum, much like Batman is at present. Arkham's terror is so overwhelming that he finds himself even unable to pray, for he thinks that he has no guard. His hallucinations worsen as he sees doors fling open and close as if to resemble applause at his flight. He sees keyholes bleeding and a choir of sexually maimed children chanting his name over and over again. Batman grabs the spear off the hands of the Archangel statue and leaps back into the house. Face to face with Killer Croc again, he wields the gigantic spear, piercing its head into the reptilian's body, smiting him down. Arkham's narration continues as he seems to speak to his mother, talking about his wounds and afflictions. He compares his own self-image to that of Attis on the pine, Christ on the cedar, and Odin on the world ash. Killer Croc drives the spear into Batman's side as blood spews out of his mouth. The image of Christ's crucifixion resonates both in the mind of Arkham as well as in the combat that Batman finds himself in. Both were pierced by a spear, suspended and left with wounds with only themselves. Arkham's mind races as he feels like he must look upon his own reflection in order to prove that he is, in fact, real. He hears the dragon approach closer to him from the outside as he desperately peels off the tapes from his mirror, breaking his own fingernails in the process. Gazing finally upon his reflection in the mirror, his eyes meet his own familiar gaze. Arkham passes out, unconscious. In his delirious imaginings, he can't tell where the form of the dragon ends and where his own begins. He questions himself if he's not the hero chosen by destiny, somehow who had confronted the dragon only to be deprived of the holy grail of his quest and of the treasure hoard at the end of his battle. The mystery revealed. Batman reaches another room, but this time he's met with a familiar voice. The voice greets him, saying, "Good evening, Batman." We find that it's none other than Dr. Cavendish, the administrator of the asylum, but something sinister is at play as he's holding a blade to Ruth Adams' throat, who warns Batman not to come near the man as he had just cut her. Batman seems to have figured out the whole overarching problem, as he declares that it was Cavendish who had freed the inmates, allowing the riot to break out in the first place. When asked why, Cavendish simply maintained that he only did what had to be done, pointing Batman to a book laid on the table where he seemed to indicate the answers were. We find out that the book in question is Amadeus Arkham's journal, the very same one whose events unfolded as the story went on. Cavendish, having already had a place marked within its pages for the Batman, asks him to give it a read so that he may understand his motives. In these pages, Arkham notes that a long-lost memory had come back to him all of a sudden. It was a memory that he'd suppressed within his subconscious mind. Up within the confines of the room of his old mother in the house, he remembers the year, 1920. It was a night rattled with violent storm and rain, with trees thrashing against the skies and rain rattling the window. He remembers his ailing mother, scared by the vision of the creature she was plagued by. Terrified, she was screaming that it was here. While all the time, Arkham insisted that there was nothing, he finally realized what the creature was. He remembers his mother's terrified visage, screaming that it had finally come for her, and he finally gets to see the creature himself. It was the image of a giant, horrifying bat. In a twisted act of deliverance, as his mother pleaded to her son not to let the monstrous bat take her, Arkham pulled out a knife and ended his own mother's life. He understood, finally, that this memory of him putting an end to his mother was what he'd suppressed all along. He understood that madness was simply there in his blood, that it was his birthright. It was his inheritance and his sole destiny. Vowing to contain the abhorrent ghosts of memory and madness, he decided to surround the place with bars, walls, and electrified fences so that they never break free. He concludes that he's the dragon's bride, the son of the widow, as he's garbed in the wedding dress of his deceased mother. Remember the words etched in the walls outside Maxie Zeus's room? It read, "Discover thyself." Perhaps it was only meant to be foreboding for this revelation, that is, the discovery of Amadeus Arkham's own depths of insanity. I must say, open-ended bits of storytelling that leave it up to the reader's own interpretation are a masterful way of adding depth to the already fascinating and nuanced plot. Cavendish screams at the Batman, and as the light falls on his body, we see that he himself is clothed in the same wedding dress. Holding the knife close to Ruth's throat, he asks Batman if he finally understands. He says that the Batman is the one who's kept sending deranged and psychotic criminals to the place, something which Amadeus Arkham himself believed to be the monstrous Bat's doing. Thus, Cavendish is convinced that Batman himself is the fabled Bat. Batman says that he's just a man, to which Cavendish snaps back by saying that he's not fooled by the cheap disguise. He knows that Batman is the demon that Arkham sought to contain all those years ago. He explains further that eventually Arkham was imprisoned for the attempted murder of his own stockbroker in 1929. In prison, he studied shamanic practices and rituals to contain the demonic Bat by magic. It turns out that Arkham had scratched out a binding spell on the floor of his prison cell using only his fingernails, a task that took him years to complete. One final time, we get to see the image of an old and frail Amadeus Arkham who, with a face full of disheveled hair and beard, is scratching away at the floor of the prison cell. His journal concludes, saying that how he finally sees virtue in madness, as the world around seemed to know nothing of law or boundaries. He says that he pities the poor minds of everyone who could be considered sane. According to him, it was nothing but a confinement within a Euclidean prison, something which alludes to the geometry of a flat, rigid world, entirely devoid of nuance and framed by only straight lines and right angles. Contemplating how he was free at last, how he was unbound by the realms of possibility, we find his life coming to its bitter end. In the final moments, he goes out, saying that he is Arkham. He's home, where he belongs. He had given everything. Cavendish reveals how, 2 years ago, he discovered his secret room where he'd found old Arkham's journal. Upon going through it, he realized that it was his destiny to finish what Amadeus Arkham had started, to get rid of the Bat. This is why he pulled off the whole ruse to bring the Batman into the asylum so that once there, he could be killed, once and for all. The Batman shouts that Cavendish is sick, that he needs help himself. This only enrages the clearly deranged man further as he leaps at Batman to kill him with his own hands. Batman, who's injured and fatigued from the prior battle, is only able to dislodge the knife from his hand, ending up with the doctor clutching his throat in a choke. Before the man can strangle him, however, Ruth Adams picks up the blade and slashes at Cavendish's throat herself, as she was no longer within the man's clutches. Horrified at what she'd just done, Ruth stands there trembling at the prospect of having murdered a man herself, while Batman assures her that he only got what he deserved. The blood-stained wedding dress clung to Cavendish's dead body. Batman and Ruth Adams make their way out of the secret room, and Batman finally asks her if she still has Two-Face's marked coin with her. Instead of leaving, Batman takes the coin from Adams, who's worried that Batman has gone back to the inmates in order to undo all her work. She asks him, "What are you?" To which Batman answers that he is stronger than them, stronger than this house of insanity, and that he must show that to them. Ruth says that it's insane for him to think that. The Batman says otherwise, maintaining that Arkham was right in one way, that sometimes it's only madness that defines who we truly are, or perhaps it's just destiny. Picking up an axe, Batman smashes a set of barred doors to the rest of the place outside, parting ways. Meanwhile, one of the inmates comes calling to Joker, saying that the Batman is wreaking havoc in the place and that the Joker should never have let him in to begin with, as he's too dangerous. Just as the Joker is being furious for being blamed, Batman arrives at the scene. He uses his newly acquired axe to break open the front gates of the Arkham Asylum. Standing before the crowd of antagonists, Batman declares everyone to be free, but the Joker says that everyone knows that already. Holding up a straitjacket, he asks Batman if he's finally come to accept his so-called kingly robes, implying that Batman himself is a lunatic who ought to be there in the asylum. He offers an alternative, however, by saying how Batman can leave himself to be put out of misery by the inmates themselves. Batman, however, suggests that he leave his fate up to Two-Face, giving Harvey his coin back. Even though Harvey meekly tries to protest initially, the chaotic nature of the outcome appeals to the Joker a lot, who seems to love this suggestion. At this point, Harvey takes the coin, saying that if the unmarked face comes up, Batman goes free. Otherwise, the scarred face coming up would mean that he meets his end. He lets the iconic coin toss its way through the air as the lightning outside glistens off its silver surface. He goes free, Harvey says, finally. In a rare sight, Batman and the Joker are seen at the gates of the Arkham Asylum, side by side. The latter remarks that parting ways is a sweet yet sorrowful thing, but adds that the Batman cannot deny that they gave him a good time while in there. The Joker doesn't leave, bidding his nemesis and other inmates a goodbye, saying that if Batman finds it too tough out there in the world, he always has a place here in the asylum. Finally, we get to see Harvey Dent standing alone, looking at the coin which he'd just flipped. It's revealed that the coin had landed scarred side up, implying that Harvey had simply chosen to ignore it, having made his own decision to let the Batman live. Quoting the famous lines from Alice in Wonderland, he looks at his carefully stacked house of cards saying, "Who cares for you? You're nothing but a pack of cards," as he knocks the entire arrangement down. The ending keeps us, the readers, guessing as to the true extent of Harvey Dent's insanity at this point. Is it that through this entire endeavor, his character has gone through some kind of growth, so that he no longer needs to rely on any source of randomness in order to make decisions? Was it that Ruth Adams' unusual modes of therapy had actually done him a favor? We may as well never truly know, but as Dent's actions showed, he transformed into someone who had his own sense of rationale. As to how and why, it's left to our own interpretation of things. Like any great literary work, it's ultimately captured in the expression, show, don't tell. Marvelous verdict. Morrison and McKean's Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious earth, stands true as the definition of a legendary comic book story. The story is gripping and unconventional, conveying elements of psychological horror through depictions of each and every one of the inmates' imageries of insanity. From the portrayal of Maxie Zeus's fascination with the God complex, the Mad Hatter's nature of a child predator, to the Joker's unpredictability of personalities, the study of psychology runs deep in the narrative. The parallel storytelling adds more layers of suspense, as the Journal of Amadeus Arkham gives a great deal of insight into the slow descent into the man's madness. It also serves as a tool for subtle world building, as we're given the origin story of the infamous Arkham Asylum and how it came to exist. Symbolisms from mythology, astrology, and a wide range of references, ranging from Carl Jung to Lewis Carroll, make it quite worth rereading, as the readers may very well keep coming across more and more hidden references within the panels. The artwork, on the other hand, is breathtaking. It's an eerie depiction of the macabre, and Dave McKean does deliver superbly in that regard. The pages of disturbingly convoluted depictions are a blend of drawing, painting, and photography in certain places. The unhinged and claustrophobic feelings that the artwork depicts stands as a truly exceptional portrayal of mental instability. It's almost as if the ambiance of the asylum brings out the worst within every character, and the art conveys that sentiment perfectly. Overall, Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious earth, was revolutionary in all aspects, including in its legacy. Of course, any keen fan would notice that the beloved Arkham Asylum game draws heavily from this comic's psychological elements, as well as plot points. The game follows Batman through a similar premise, down to having the character of Quincy Sharp, the asylum's warden, who believes himself to be the reincarnation of Amadeus Arkham. Of course, coming across a body of work so rich in terms of story, artwork, and even the legacy of comic book culture would be quite a delight for any fan of The Dark Knight. Therefore, my verdict remains that this should be a must-read for all those like myself who know and love the world of the Caped Crusader.